What's up guys, my name is Aiden and we're back with a new screencast. So the Angular team recently announced the fifth release candidate, and the new big thing here is something called NgModules, which we'll take a look at and build our app module in my ng2 repo at GitHub. I'm going to link to it in the description and you're going to see it throughout this screencast. Also, we're going to revisit Angular 2 forms, which I did a rant on, I think, a couple of months ago. So if you missed it, I'm going to try to link to it up here. And a couple of things has happened. Angular Forms now doesn't live in the common barrel anymore. It's moved to its own. It's called Angular Forms. And they are up at version 03.0. And we're going to see... and we're actually going to see that they've addressed the issues that I tried to raise, and we're going to upgrade our repo to leverage these new features. So before we begin, let me start by reading from the Angular site what Angular modules are. So Angular modules, also known as NgModules, are the powerful new way to organize and bootstrap your Angular application. Anyways, let's try to upgrade our ng2 repo to the latest release candidate. So I'm going to link to two documents in the description. One of them is this announcement on their official blog, which is a really good read. They talk about the compiler, and it gives you a little bit more depth to knowing what the compiler does, the just-in-time compiler and the ahead-of-time compiler, which is a really good read, not too complicated, even though if you maybe don't care about the compiler. And then we're gonna try to use this document, which will help us to migrate to the latest release candidate. So there seems to be 5 simple steps here. Simply just update to RC5, and they are telling you that your application won't break from RC4. But we're not even gonna try this because, to be honest, I doubt it. We are using Angular Material, and in the Alpha.7 release, which we're going to upgrade to now, they have introduced NgModules. And we want all that to come together perfectly. So we're going to just upgrade the router and the material components along with Angular to latest release candidate. And hopefully after this, things won't be moving as much, because really this is kind of a big thing to do between 2 release candidates, if you ask me. So we update to RC5. We'll create a module to bootstrap our application, so we won't be creating separate modules for each component set. We're just going to create one app module, but I'm guessing that's enough for our repo. And then we're gonna update our bootstrapping of the application and update the third-party libraries. That's where we're gonna load up forms and the HTTP module along with the material modules. And then we're gonna try to do some cleanup to see how our code can be simplified and hopefully not as repetitive as it may seem in some components right now. We're going to try to get rid of some boilerplate code by introducing this new concept, NgModules. And one thing that we won't be addressing in this screencast will be lazy loading of NgModules. That's super cool, but we're going to try to save that for a new screencast. So let's jump into the code and open up VS Code, and we can see that we are targeting release candidate 3 here. So let's try to update this to release candidate 5, and then in our router here we're targeting Alpha 8. We're gonna go ahead and jump right up to release candidate 1, which is the current version of the router. And then for the material, we're going to jump up to the latest alpha, which is 7. So let's try to just replace all Alpha 6 to Alpha 7. And then one more thing, we got forms at 010 here. We're gonna jump to 030, which I believe is the latest. Alright, so let's save this up, and I think this is a compatible configuration. You never know. I'm gonna try to run npm install, and hopefully it will install all the dependencies. Alright, so that took a while. I had cleared my entire NodeModules folder, and after npm install, everything installed without any errors. So that is cool. So basically we've done this step right now. We've updated Angular, and we've also updated our optional libraries since we are using Router and Forms. This is exactly what we did. And we updated all our material components. And it says if you're using Angular CLI, which we are since a couple of screencasts ago, we should update the TypeScript compiler wrapped and save that as a dev dependency. So let's go ahead and do that. And while this is running, let's make this bigger. We can go ahead and jump to step 2 here. So let's create our first module, our app module, and just copy paste the contents from the migration guide. All right, so if you open up VS Code, we can open up source, and in app, we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it AppModule.ts. We're just going to copy paste the contents, but our app component doesn't live in app.components. It should just be app. And now we should be good with the TypeScript compiling at least, but obviously this won't run for us. We need to do a lot more here. But before we go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and check out next step, which tells us to update our main TS to use the just-in-time compiler. And here we can pretty much take this as is and replace our main TS, because our current main TS will go into our app module, which we can see in next step. But let's take one step at a time here and open up main.ts. And we should be able to just replace it with the following code, just taken straight from the migration guide. And let's take this out and put it in our app modules and just comment it out, because we're gonna get these things one by one, but to make this migration as smooth as possible, we're gonna do it bits and pieces at a time. So let's save this up and go ahead and check step 4. So we are moving forward really fast, but we aren't really done with step 2 here. We need to do some more things. So this guide is kind of misleading. This is if you create the hello world example with at the Angular site, then you can use this guide as is. But we're gonna need to do a couple of more things. So now we can import our library modules into our NgModule, which is our app module. So we can already see that we are importing the browser module, I think. Yep, we got it right here. But then again, this isn't enough. We are using more things. We're using the HTTP module, we're using the forms module, and the material component modules. And to see which modules we're using, we can go ahead and investigate our packages.json file. So if you just import, let's start by declaring an import, and we can see what we can find in the new forms barrel. So let's do an import from, and then go Angular/HTTP. And now we should be able to find something called HTTP module, which you can see right here. And we can do the same thing for, let's see here, forms. We should be able to find something called the forms module. Got a lot of things here. Forms module. And we also got our router module. And obviously we need to go and check in router for that. And now we can provide these to our imports here. Forms module and then a router module. So by doing this, we won't be needing to import the router directives or the HTTP directives or the forms directives in our component annotation. So right now, if we open up to do.ts, we can see we do these imports here just to pass them into our directives. By telling the app that this to-do component belongs to our app component, and by feeding these modules to our module declaration, we can get rid of all this repetitive boilerplate code in our components. But that's step 5. We're gonna clean up our code later, but that is what we are aiming to achieve now. So aside from importing these modules, the material team has gone ahead and created modules for the Alpha.7 release. So if you take a look in our packages.json file, we can see that we are getting the button card and all these modules down to the toolbar. So let's just copy paste them in here so we know what we're getting. Comment it out. This is just for me to be able to type faster. And if we go ahead and get things from Angular to material, and then let's get rid of this as well. And then we can start with a button, for instance. And now, as we saw previous, we should be able to find a button module, MD button module. And we'll repeat this for all our components that we want to use. So from card, toolbar, and now we should be able to find an MD card module and so forth for all the components. MD checkbox module, MD core module. There is probably some better way to do this, but I haven't spent too much time to familiarize myself with this. So let's just do it the hard way, or I don't know if this is the easy way really. So let's get all these things. MD toolbar module. All right. And now we're gonna want to feed them to our module declaration here. So how many do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that was the bottom module. Let's get the card, checkbox, core, input, progress cycle, and the toolbar module. All right. So I'm still not confident that it will probably build, but the app won't run because our bootstrap function, or the bootstrap function actually looks fine, but we need to do a couple of more declarations, or at least we need to, let's see here, if we scroll down at what we had previously, we have all these kind of providers to make the app run. We haven't configured our routes yet. We haven't told the router what location strategy to use, or how to resolve the off HTTP or the off guard or our data service. So we're gonna need to provide these things as well in our NgModule for our app to work. So, and where we're gonna do that, that's not actually in the guide. What I did, I went ahead and checked out the material to GitHub repo and saw what they did. So what we're gonna need to do here in the app module, so we're still gonna want to do this. We're gonna need to enable production mode if we are in production. So let's put that in here as well and comment that out. And we're gonna need to import an environment for that. Let's do that. Import environment from same level. And then we're going to enable prod mode. So where do we get that from? That's from Angular Core. Let's keep all these things really. We're going to need to do these things still. So we're going to get enable prod mode from Core, and then bind and provide a location strategy and hash location strategy. And then we're going to pass them into a new property here that's called providers. And what you can think about here is that basically everything that you passed into this array here in the bootstrap method, you're going to need to pass that to the providers in your app module as well, except for a couple of things that they removed, obviously, like this disable deprecated forms and stuff like that. And we don't need to HTTP providers since we are bootstrapping the HTTP module. But we are going to pass in our router provider along with our location strategy. So let's just copy paste that and pass it in up here. And seems like I've forgotten to import app router provider. Let's do that as well. And auth config as well. All right, so let's see. We are getting off guard. Let's get all these things. Let's keep all this and just put it up in here along with the old stuff. So you can see it's a lot of moving things around. We can get this from the root now and get that from shared. See, we should be importing everything now. All right, cool. So we are passing our routes to the providers and we are setting up the location strategy. So what else have we missed? Yeah, we're not passing these guys. So let's pass them in as well. And I think we should have all the imports set. All right, and I think this looks good. Cool. So just to remind ourselves, we take a look in the document. What we are doing right now, we are importing our library modules to our NgModule. So we're at step 4. And in step 5, hopefully when the app is up and running, we can go ahead and start cleaning up our code. And also we're going to take a look at forms. We can see that we can finally reset a form after submitting it, which has been a feature that a lot of people in the community has requested, and which I also did a rant on a couple of months ago. All right, so let's take a look in our code again. So we are declaring our app component. We have more components. We're gonna see that we're gonna get an error that we're not declaring all our components in our application. So we're going to address that later, but for now, I think this looks good. We are bootstrapping the app component, which is totally fine. Let's keep that together. And I think we can go ahead and delete this. All right, so let's save this up and try to compile our code for the first time. Let's just do a sanity check. We basically we're just firing up the just-in-time compiler from our main TS, and then we moved basically all our code from here and declared it as an app module. It's an NgModule, but it's really our app module. We don't have smaller modules yet that encapsulates pieces of functionality, which it's really used, or that's actually the purpose of modules, to be able to group components that belong together. But let's just create our first app module here. So let's get up the command prompt and try to run ng-build. All right, cool. So it built successfully. Still, let's cross our fingers. We still don't know if this will work when serving the application. So let's do an ng-serve, and looks like we're good. Let's switch back to our browser. Open up a new tab. Let's get up the developer console as well. See if we get any errors. Whoops, got a lot of errors. Alright, so I figured it out and it wasn't easy. I spent 5 or 10 minutes or so to proofread the entire, let's see here, the entire AppModules.ts. And let me show you what it was. And I actually found it by seeing the typo in the file. I didn't really figure it out by looking at the error message, because the error message is really insane. Doesn't tell us a lot about the error. So we can see something is going on when we're trying to bootstrap application. We get an error already in main.js, but that doesn't say very much, because our main.js is really simple. So obviously something happened when we tried to bootstrap our app module. And the thing was, I can see, if you are really careful here, you can see that I put down module at the end of every module here, of course. But then at MD progress cycle, I forgot the module, so I got the actual component here. And when we try to pass in a component to this imports array here, we get this error. Something goes wrong. So it tries to load up something from this, and the type is obviously not what it expected it to be. And we got that really strange error that was didn't actually tell us that much. So simply by doing going ahead and put module here at the end, and let's copy paste it just to be sure, save that up. We can see that the compiler will trigger a refresh, or our watch does, and by switching to the browser, we can see that we are loading up our application, which is really cool. We can type in things. We can see that the validation is working. We are disabling this button based on the validation. And we can navigate to our about page, and we should be able to log in as well. And we can hit our profile page, but we haven't fired up our backend. Let's do that really quick just to see that the HTTP module works as well. So let's go to screencasts, ng2 play, and then I think we called it backend. And just go ahead and type node app.js, and now refresh, and we can see that the HTTP module works as well, which is cool. So let's take a look at one other thing here. We can see that we are getting these errors here. That it found a couple of components for us, the to-do component, about component, profile component via entry components, but it wasn't declared or important on our NgModule. So this works for now, but when they remove a couple of things later down the road, this will break. So let's get ahead of them and declare all our components on our app module. So basically, we can see that we are just declaring the app component here. But if we open up our, I think it's called roots, or isn't it? Here it is, roots.ts. We are importing our components here. So let's just take this code and throw it in here as well, and then pass them into a declaration. And by doing this, we are telling Angular that these components belong to this module. And we can save this up. If we switch back to our browser now, hopefully we won't get those errors anymore. And voila, the errors are gone. Super cool. So let's make sure that this works. We can still check things. We can mark them all as complete. Whoops. So I'm betting this was broken all the time. Let's just see if we can find out what it is. Let's see here. Let's just put a breakpoint somewhere. And we are jumping to the TS file since we are using source map files. And what actually happens when you press that button? Toggle all. We're expecting a boolean to come in here. Let's see what that actually is. So things may have changed. And yeah, we can see that we are getting something called the MD checkbox change and not the boolean that we were expecting. So let's go ahead and fix that really quick, since this may have been broken for quite some time now. So let's come here to to-do.ts, and in the checkbox here, import that as well, and expect our type to be something else here. So this will be a checkbox changed. So I don't know, changed event or something. And now we should just take the checked property instead. So let's save that up, come back. Let's go with the breakpoint. Hopefully we fixed it now. So let's see, we got a debugger. And we can see we got the new source code. Let's add a couple more to-dos. Mark them all as complete. And now we can see that this seems like it will work. And we can check and uncheck all. Okay, so that was an old bug, probably. So I said that we're gonna revisit forms. So one thing I've seen, Dave put in a thing, or actually before we do that, we haven't checked out this fifth step, which is the cleanup, which is the part that I love the most. We're gonna get to delete code. And as I said here, in to-do.ts, we can see we're passing a bunch of things here to this directives array. And we should be able to get rid of most things. I think everything except this reactive form directives, because that isn't baked in to the module yet. So let's get rid of all these things we're passing in here, except that one directive. And we should be able to get rid of it up here as well. Not the form below, we're using these things. But we can get rid of all these imports. Almost, since we just imported that changed class, but we should be able to get rid of this as well. Save that up. If we come into our to-do.html, we should be able to use the progress cycle now, even though we're not passing that into our components and the buttons and all that we're using in that template. So let's see if this still works in the browser. Come back to our app. It's refreshing. And we can see that the components are still working. So we are getting rid of all this boilerplate code. We are declaring it once on the NgModule, so we don't need to declare it repetitive in every component. So what else do we got here? We got, I think our about.ts is pretty clean. Our profile, I think that's clean as well. So we do have a really simple app. We don't need to think about that much. I think we should have something more to clean up in app.ts perhaps. Right, you're passing in root the directives here in the toolbar. We can just go ahead and get rid of this, I think. Let's try this out. Get rid of the toolbar there, the root the directives. We should not need that. Save that up. And we can still use the links in our application. We can switch to profile, which is super cool. So this is working and we are getting rid of a bunch of code. So that's always fun to delete code. And now let's revisit forms. So we can see here in to-do.ts that we actually, each time we submit the form, we rebuild the form. So if we investigate what we have now, instead of, you can see in my comment here, I'm pretty frustrated. How in the hell do we reset this thing? So if we don't rebuild the form, let's just remind ourselves what we're trying to accomplish here. And we can see here, let's debug if the form is valid or not, depending on if it's dirty. Let's see here, uncomment this. Switch to browser. Let's go to the to-do page. You can see if you write something and then delete it, we can see that the form is invalid and the actual control is invalid as well. And when we hit enter, we can see that the validation, that the value hasn't been clear, but if we were to clear the value from the controller, we would get that the form is invalid, which isn't actually what we are expecting. We want to reset the validation. And I just took a quick glimpse here and noticed that we don't need to rebuild the form here. We can see that we can either reset our entire form, which now only contains one input controller, but here we have something called reset. But we can also just reset our form control if we would like to do that. So we got reset on the entire form, which I'm guessing will just go ahead and run reset on all its controls. So let's go with the form reset. We don't need to rebuild the form at all. Let's go ahead and, yeah, we can keep this. We just call it from the constructor. Let's actually move that up. No need to break that out into its own method. Right, so we just, after we have submitted it, we can try to reset the form. Save it up. Alright, so let's enter something and we can see that we reset the form. So finally we can call reset, and they've probably done a bunch of other things, but that's the first thing I noticed, and I thought, why not revisit that, since I did a separate screencast about just ranting how bad forms was. So it seems like they are working on forms right now. I'll probably try to check out what else is new and do a separate screencast on that. My main focus here was the release candidate 5 and the big new thing there, which was NgModules. And we saw here today how we can easily upgrade our app. Even though it's still a pretty simple app, I don't think, hopefully people haven't built too complex apps yet. If you've done it, you'll probably regret it, since even though Angular is in release candidate, it's moved quite a lot. So I think this was a good release from the Angular team, and I hope I've helped you guys to migrate your own apps. And as always, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure to follow me on Twitter. And until next time, have a nice day, guys. Bye.